I think I should start off with my own question, but please put together some good questions. So we have here psychologist A and psychologist B. And it's interesting, the difference is psychologist A is very generous and gives lots of money to our business schools. Psychologist B, he's sort of taking what he can from us.
It's not enough, though.
But business leadership is all about success in terms of profit, growth, and financial reward. And in fact, a couple of years ago, we had Walter Isaacson here, who some of you may know wrote the book on Steve Jobs. And he sort of portrays Steve Jobs as very close to the dark side. I'm going to pose this question to Mac. Mac, if I could provide you 100% guaranteed evidence that you would get better business success, higher profits, more growth by being a dark side leader, would you adopt that in your role and your responsibility as a CEO to the shareholders and to the board? Would you adopt that approach, and if not, why not?
It's an interesting question. I think maybe all of us need to ask ourselves. On my part, I am 100% certain I would not adopt those kinds of characteristics. And one of the reasons, which is profound for me and personal, is that I want to enjoy my day-to-day experience. I want to enjoy my life. And I have found that satisfaction and fulfillment and that sense of flourishment is really can only occur if the relationships I'm involved in are of a certain quality, and there's a high level of trust in those relationships, and we're enjoying each other, and that has just been so important. And we often talk in our organizations sometimes, well, how can we summarize all this really quickly? And it's and one of the expressions is results and relationships. Great results, and we want great relationships. And we said that years ago. But underneath that relationships piece, for myself, was, I want great results, like other business leaders do, and I'm driven for it. But I have to have great relationships. And if you treat people poorly, and if they go home at the end of the day and they're frustrated, and they're angry, and they bring all that into their families, that just doesn't work for me. Or they bring it back into the office, and maybe they treat me well, but they're not treating other people well. That doesn't work either, because ultimately I wanted to see everybody have a certain quality of experience where they can develop themselves and where they can experience a level of satisfaction and where they can thrive. And it's easy to say. It's much harder to make it work and to put it into practice. But that, Jim, is a very clear response on my part.
Thanks, Mac. Appreciate that. Justin, just to benefit those in the audience who are thinking in the back of their mind, yes, for sure, is there any evidence to support the upside of the dark side?
Well, personally, to yourself, I guess you get promoted. But actually, the research shows that it has very strong negative effects on job performance of subordinates when engaging in this type of abusive supervision. And then actually, a thing that Mac mentioned, maybe even more disconcerting, is that there are a number of spillover effects. So when you have an abusive organization or abusive leader, that spills over into people's home life, including increased excessive drinking, spousal problems, family just dysfunction in general. And so people are carrying these things then back into their home. And then on the other side of coming back into the workplace, there is showing an even stronger effect of counterproductive work behaviors. So if you're a leader and you're yelling at people and you're mistreating people, what do you think happens to then your subordinates? One, they definitely hate you. And they're also then learning that this is what what type of behavior is rewarded in organizations. And then they will do the same things to other employees inside the organization and possibly even customers outside of the organization. So how you behave as a leader is information that subordinates are picking up. And so the research shows that across the board, it has strong negative effects. And we all know of companies that have either disbanded, or for those who invest in organizations know the toxic types of relationships that made sure that the company actually never even got off the ground. And that's why, a number of entrepreneurial businesses fail, not because the idea was bad, it's because the people working together were bad.
Okay, thanks, Justin. Sherry, I think you've got a question back there.
I was just going to ask a little bit to follow that up is, as organizations or people start to veer towards the dark side, how possible is it to bring them back? And Mac, maybe you can talk about examples of where you've had to find a way to either pull somebody back onto the right path, or do you always end up pushing them outside the organization as damaged goods that are beyond redemption?
It's a good question. My own personal experience is that it's not predictable. I wish I could say if you turn to these people, if you give them support, if you really work with them and give them lots of feedback, give them professional advice, that you can expect a turnaround. But that's not necessarily the case. There are some individuals who, even if they have the awareness that they're doing these sorts of things, they still can't kind of control themselves, particularly under stress. And so you can do all the testing, you can get all the feedback, you can get all the coaching, and the next week they'll be in a meeting with a group, with their staff, and something will upset them, they'll turn red, they'll be pounding on the table and ripping a strip off somebody, even though that they know that they shouldn't be doing that. And so, on the other hand, I think I have seen examples of kind of a wake-up, where people get the feedback, particularly in 360s, like they're just shocked. I mean, I never saw myself this way, or is it true? And so they explore that, and they do get some coaching, and they, through self-reflection and some behavioral modification, they can drive past it because they don't want to be that way. And they never thought they were hurting other people, for example. Our response to it is to firstly bring it to the attention of the employee, and to elevate everybody's awareness about it, and to work with them, and perhaps even to work with them over an extended period of time, to give them the benefit of the doubt, but to deal with it.
Okay, thank you. Heather has a question.
Oh yeah. Hi, it's Matthias Grum. My question to you is, I think both of you are very good at defining the characteristics of things that could go wrong, both for management and for the organization. I was wondering if you were possibly giving us some clues about defining a matrix of the things that could be identified to overcome those negative characteristics, and develop a matrix, particularly for identifying investments, as you said, where you can see some of those things and try to, what tools would you use to bypass those negative signs and probably go forward? Thanks.
I mentioned a few of the tools, such as 360 reviews and sort of strength of culture surveys, but from a management point of view, I think what's critical is to identify what it is you want your culture to deliver, somewhat objectively. That is, it's not just my values, it's what it is that I know our culture has to deliver for us to be successful and to achieve and meet and realize our vision. And one piece of that is accountability. That is, if we're not prepared to be answerable to each other, if that isn't part of our culture, that we're answerable to each other, we will start to have problems. And for people to really stand in accountability, getting back to vulnerability, it can feel quite vulnerable, particularly if you're a senior leader. And so if I see that some people just are not prepared to be fully accountable, that is in itself a red flag. But really the point I'm making is to articulate that as, in a sense, as an output, a desired output or a desired outcome of culture. And another would be collaboration. Like, we all know that we have to work together and there's cooperation, but can we collaborate and work in a really highly functioning way? And if you look at what's required to get high level of collaboration, you have to have a high level of interreliance and trust. And another is commitment. We have to be committed, and our culture has to create a high level of commitment and drive and resolve and will. And so it's kind of this is the attitude that we will do it. Accountability, I think of, is we can, because if you don't feel you can do it, you're not going to be accountable. You can't stand the exposure of being accountable if you feel you can't do something. And then there's the other side, which is kind of will, and it's more power-based. And if there's a sharing of power in the organization, you can create more and more commitment. And also, then lastly, to create a learning environment where there's a level of discernment, in a sense, an intelligence, a discerning intelligence. And I don't mean like intelligence in a technical sense, an IQ sense. But that needs to pervade our culture. It's a sensitivity. And I mention that in response to your question because we can't just walk around saying, well, we don't want these behaviors, these dark side behaviors. I mean, that's helpful. But we need to articulate what we do want. And it's harder to do. And I think it's a very, very important function for management and leadership. And what I have found really helpful in thinking about what we do want is to ask what must we have in an organization, in our culture, combined then with everything else, the competencies and our expertise and our knowledge and our strategies and so forth.
So, Justin, I think Matthias is really looking for a good consultant, so is it justinweinhardt.com?
Yeah, there you go.
We got a little bit of time, but we'll take a few quick questions, so we'll go real chop. Sherry, you've got somebody over there?
I'm trying to tie the discussion topic and the table topic together a little bit, and sort of have to use a sports analogy, and I'm hoping that you can comment, make sense of what I'm trying to say.
Remember, I'm American, so it can't be hockey. But
okay, no, it's football. Actually.
Okay, perfect.
It's actually football. So, if the general manager or the coach of a team came to you and said, I know that you want to have a completely open, transparent, honest, forgiving, culturally sound environment, but there's a wide receiver out there, Terrell Owens, for example, that he's smoking hot. He'll help us get to the Super Bowl. He's going to flame out in a couple years, but you're a step removed from that, so don't worry about it. It's not going to, none of this stink's going to get on you. I'll take the heat. We'll make some tremendous strides, then we'll cut him loose. Just comments around that, because it does translate to business, I think, to a degree.
Well, weirdly, I actually then am going to use a study about hockey, not even kidding, to show. So my colleague, Nick Turner over there, the tall blonde-haired guy by your table, he did a study on examining hockey coaches, and then also looked to see who is actually influencing adolescents' essentially morality on the ice. So is it the coach? Is it the parents? Is it the peers? And they're able to look at all three of these things, examining who's having this type of influence on the hockey players. And a coach that emphasizes essentially bad behavior, and this is now where I'm going to get lost, like checking and hooking and stuff, those things that you can't do. If having a coach who encourages that, even if you have parents that are, Mahatma Gandhi, if you have the abusive coach who's encouraging this type of behavior, it is going to spill over into the performance of the players. And also the players then learn from themselves. So would it be possible that having like a dysfunctional person could give you some short-term success? In the case of Terrell Owens, they did get to the Super Bowl, but they didn't win. And I think to win something so incredibly difficult, to succeed in business, to be Fortune 500, Fortune 100, you have to pretty much have everything kind of going perfectly, including a lot of luck. And so that person might help you for 6 months, but if you then keep them around, you don't know what's going to happen the next 6 months later. And that's why it takes a longer term view that is not necessarily as common in society, but that's really what is required to have long-term success. So, I mean, if you want to be a full then psychopath, you could just have like your business be profitable for 6 months, sell it to some other person, and have the greater fool theory work out. But, you know, we want to all be nice to each other. So.
Okay. So we got 2 minutes left, and where's Heather? Oh, right, Heather's got a question right here. Last
Hi.
question.
Robert Leeds here. I'm wondering how often, like, culture is so important in terms of building a good foundation, and as Max said and Justin have said, looking long term. How often do you sort of partake in building culture in terms of exercises? You
So
can't
this would
have
be
that sort of
Matt.
1 year retreat or day to day. Are there specific things that you do to build that culture, or activities in-house or out-of-house, like a retreat, for example?
I think to a certain extent it has to be continuous, firstly. I just want to say that. And that management and the executive leaders have to be prepared to articulate this and to act on it and to model it on a continuous basis. And I've always looked for, there's a number of ARC Resources and ARC Financial people here, and they may not agree with this, but I've always tried to look for different ways to say what it is I wanted to say, although you might feel that you were just having to hear the same old over and over. But I think that's the first point. And then in a more formal sense, we at ARC Financial, for example, we have quarterly what we call strategy sessions, and they're focused very much on organizational development and organizational excellence. And so are they focused directly to create a stronger culture and the bonding of that? Not necessarily, but they are focused directly to give everybody the opportunity to look more deeply into how it is we're managing ourselves and how it is we're managing our business. And ARC Resources is similar, and they have a lot of different kinds of initiatives to maintain a strong culture.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, and please join me in thanking our awesome panel here.
Thank you.